Hello and welcome to lesson 50 of the Learning Guitar series. In this particular lesson we're going to introduce a new topic, double stops, and we're going to look at them over time, obviously, because it's quite a large topic. And as a matter of fact, in order to avoid having 10-15 lessons on this, which might make the learning process quite heavy, we're kind of going to intervene lessons on double stops with other material. Say, for example, probably triadic inversions, chord inversions. We're going to start from thirds double stops, and the reason being that when we think in terms of harmony, in terms of chords, triads are built in staccato thirds. Anyway, I'm going to have a series of PDFs which are created for this lesson. We're going to look through them literally and clarify the points which might be a little bit more difficult to understand or a bit more obscure. Before doing that, of course, I want to thank the Patreon which are supporting this project on Patreon, and thank you very much for doing that. It's very much appreciated. And of course, the people who are subscribing to the YouTube channel is always nice, to see that the material is appreciated. Now, let's have a look at the theory behind it. So, the relation between major mode intervals of thirds and thirds double stops. Double stops are not chords, but if we combine our understanding of what we have studied so far in terms of diatonic scale, modes, and the fact that triads, arpeggios, and chords are built using staccato third intervals, then we can frame our understanding of thirds double stops both melodically and harmonically, and use them as soloing device or to imply chords. Now, what does that mean? If we look at triads, say and we started this, lesson 1 in a way. If I look at this arpeggio here, which is a major triad. Well, this is actually a sequence of minor and major third intervals. So the interval in between the root and the third is a major third. And the root and the interval in between the third and the fifth is a minor third. And if I continue, let's take our modal Ionian arpeggio. This is 1, 3, 5, 7, major 7, 9, 11, 13, root note. The interval in between root and third is a major third. Third and fifth is a minor third. Fifth and major 7 is a major third. Major 7, 9 is a minor third interval. 9 and 11 is a minor third interval. 11 and 13 is a major third interval. And then from 13 to root note is another minor third interval. So as you can see, the reason I'm starting from thirds as double stops is because a lot of the harmony we employ when we play all sorts of music, is based on chords which are built from staccato thirds. So if I play G major, big chord, E shape, again, this is basically a triad. That's all there is to it. It's just that some notes are repeated more than once. So here is a G, here is a G, here is another G. Then don't be surprised if you're going to find a B note here, which is actually here when we're playing G. And then there is a D note in there. And there is obviously one right over there, right? And there is another one right over here. So even if I'm playing 6 notes, I'm actually playing root note, third and fifth, okay? Same thing if I was doing major 7, etc. But, so the fact that harmony is built with interval of thirds means that when it comes to double stops, so, and by the way, in a second I'm going to explain you what double stop is in case you don't know it, we can use them not only melodically, but we can actually use it to imply harmony. As we will see in a second, a double stop is not necessarily a chord. It cannot be a chord. That's why we call them double stop. Let's continue with our PDF, and let's see what else is in there. If we look at triads, we can express them as intervals from the root, like we did until now in this course, or as a sequence of stacked third intervals, where M3, in this case for this page, is equal to a major third and M3 minor third. In doing so, we can rewrite triads in the following manner. So a major triad, 135, is also a sequence 1, a major third followed by a minor third. A minor triad is 1, flat 3, 5, but also root note, a flat 3 interval followed by a major 3 interval. A diminished triad is a root note, flat 3, flat 5, but also we can spell it as root note followed by a minor third interval followed by another minor third interval. An augmented triad 1, 3, sharp 5 is a root note followed by a major interval followed by another major interval. In other words, we stack thirds. So here is major third into minor third, and that gives me a major triad. Minor third followed by a major third, that gives me a minor triad. A minor third followed by another minor third gives me a diminished triad. A major third followed by another major third gives me an augmented triad. And if that's true for, triads, and if it does it for triad, it means it does it for chords too. It means that major third, in terms of double stops, can be used across, as I said, both harmonically and melodically, and we'll see in a second how. Let's continue with the PDF. Applied to the diatonic scale, we can quickly realize that all modal arpeggio can also be spelled as a sequence of third intervals. For example, Ionian modal arpeggio is 1, 3, 5, major 7, 9, 11, 13, but also root note followed by a major third interval, followed by a minor third, followed by a major third, followed by a minor third, followed by a minor third, followed by a major third. If spelling modal arpeggios as intervals from the root helped us in understanding each mode, the concept of key center and creating basic chords and add appropriate expansion to them, spelling them as stacked thirds will help us in using thirds double stops appropriately, both melodically and harmonically. So let's first recap what we know about the diatonic scale and modes, but this time looking at them in terms of stack of intervals of thirds. So here you have basically a table where you have the modes, the way we studied them so far. Here I'm using the vertical structure. You could have used the horizontal, you would have done the same. But the reason I'm using the vertical structure is because on the side, you can see the stacked thirds, and if it's a major 3 or a minor 3. Now, the guitar is a very geometrical instrument, which means in a way the theory can make it sound more difficult than it is. If we look at it from a geometric point of view, interval of thirds, double stops, so for example this, okay, you will always have, say, any note you want. Let's use this one. Here is where your major third is going to be, okay? And here is where your minor third is going to be. So basically you're looking at the next string, a semitone down for a major third interval, and a tone down and a string below for a minor third. So if I go, say, on this string, I'll have the same kind of phenomenon. If I go on this string, same kind of thing. Obviously, things are going to change when we look at the second and third string, because of the way the guitar is tuned. In this case, what we're going to have is going to be a major interval where the two notes are literally under each other, and a minor third is going to be like a semitone below. Again, when we move to the E and B string, we're back to a major third and a minor third. This is, and again, don't worry, like if it's not totally clear right now, we got plenty of PDFs that shows this stuff. But what I want you to see, like, as I say, the guitar is very geometrical. And let's take, for example, Ionian major modes. We know the major modes are major, minor, minor, major, major, dominant 7, minor, half diminished, and back to major. If I was to execute that with double stop, although, as I said, it's not chord, double stops are not chord, but if I use, say, in the key of G, this is a G note, and that's the third. Well, the second chord is going to be a minor, a tone up, and a minor third. So you have major, minor, minor, major, major, makes sense. As I said, it looks more complicated than it is, but it requires you to have understood by now how to harmonize a major scale. Now, if we want to call this Ionian, we're in Ionian realm, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian, and back to Ionian. Feel free to do so. But it was important to understand here that we're framing the double stop within the scale. Otherwise, we're just playing random. What's the point, right? So what makes it very interesting when it comes to double stop and thirds in particular, because chords are built in staccato thirds, is that when I take an interval, a double stop, I don't necessarily have to take the root and the third. I'll still have sequencing across our major scale. Let me show you on a diagram. It makes even more sense. So in studying double stops, we have many options in terms of which two notes we want to use, while the above table will inform us in terms of appropriate sequence minor thirds and major third that we need to use as we move up and down the neck of the guitar. For example, we can use root and third, and here is will be your sequence. Is the one I just executed. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, minor. But do we necessarily have to use root and third? Of course not. We can use third and fifth because the intervals, as you can see, are still all thirds. In this case, the sequence would go minor, major, major, minor, minor, major, minor. And I can keep going because we can use fifth and seven. And we can use 7 and 9. And we can use 9 and 11. And it's always interval of thirds. So when these tables is for you to understand the concept. I have a couple of PDFs we're going to go through now where you can see this in practice and you can study it practically, but it's important that you understand what's going on here and why double stops when it comes to thirds are so important, and that's why it's the first thing I'm doing as opposed to doing seconds or fourths. We're going to do them later on. But there is so much we can extract out of just 30 intervals in terms of double stops. So and it cannot be ignored. It would be oversimplifying if we did. So it should not be a surprise to you at this point that the interval in between third and the octave is also a third, okay? In this case, we're always using third double stops. Only difference is the part of the chord we want to use in developing them. Of course, as you will see in the future, we can always mix and match. Do not let this theory to confuse you. As you will see in practice, this is used in looks in particular, given how geometrical the guitar neck is, etc., etc. So, I hope this part is not necessarily clear. I have, you go on Patreon, you can download the PDF that I just showed you, then read it again in more details. But what I want you to understand, as I said, is the fact that we are interval of thirds. We can extract it from different points. It doesn't have to be root and third, and because we do that, don't forget that. As we say, the double stop is not a chord, and but given the, especially if you're playing with another guitar player, or if you're playing with a bass player, the moment, say, the bass player plays the root, I'll simulate, the bass player playing this. Now, the fact that we are combining a double stop and what a bass player might be playing, those three notes combined, now that's a chord. And the fact that we can play some very small, two strings kind of, as I said, these not chords, two strings, double stops combined with a bass player or another guitar player, allows us to kind of put the foundation of what we want the listener to hear, as opposed to a big chord all the time. And especially if there is two guitar players, this allows us to spread the chord in terms of arranging. In fact, double stop, as you will see when we do some arranging notion, they're also very, 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 very useful when it comes to arranging. So, as I said, double stop, especially thirds, very useful harmonically, like in this case, like I'm doing, of course, melodically also to create melodies, and as a arranging tool. Now let's see why a double stop is actually not a chord. So I'm going to write a simple double stop here. So basically, this is a major third apart. The reason I cannot say this is a chord is because the moment I add a note, this could be two notes belonging to several different chords. Let's say, for example, the bass player was playing this. So if that was the root note, now this is a G minor. Let's say that the bass player maybe was playing this instead. Let's delete that. If the bass player was playing this, now combined we were playing some degree of E flat major 7. Let's say that the bass player is playing this. Now, combined this would be a suspended 6 kind of chord. If the bass player was playing this, this is a F major 7. And, let's say that the bass player is playing this. This now would be like a root and a third for a B flat chord. And, the list can go on, but the bottom line is that two notes on their own, they're not enough information to say, okay, that's the chord. But the moment we add them to, say, somebody playing a bass note, a root note, or a second guitar player, the combination, it will create 3, 4 notes, 5 notes, and at that point it becomes a chord. Now that's important to kind of establish. That's why they call double stops and no chords, at the end of the day. Now let's keep looking at what we have in terms of practice, like literally practice. And I used 2 different approaches to this. The usual looking at things from the key of G, but also looking at things in different keys, and you'll see the difference in a second. So first of all, let's think of double stops and thirds in this case, like something that we can play either horizontally on the guitar or vertically on the guitar. By horizontally, I mean along the neck. By vertically, say for example, which we do if we look at it from the key of G, I mean this. And we're basically going vertically on the guitar. Let's first of all look at horizontal versions of it. So the first PDF is in diagram, double stops. Below are double stop performed horizontally in group of 2 strings in the key of G. So everything you see is in the key of G, okay? And of course the root note in this case is here. When you look at the second diagram, the root note is here. The sequence is still major, minor, minor, major, etc., etc. It just is going to start from different point. In this case, the root note is here. Here, the root note is going to be up here. And I just spotted a mistake. This guy. I'll fix it. And then upload it better. And here is your root note. So if we look at the different sequences, I will do it with the PDF on, so you can actually hear it, but also see it at the same time. So here is this first line, and the way you read it, you put together the 2 black dots, 1, 3, then the 2 white dots, 2, 4, then the 2 black dots, 3, 5, then the 2 white dots, 4, 6, etc., etc. Now, if we look at the second line here, starts from the 4th of the key of G. If we look at the third line, it starts from the major 7, and it's like a minor interval followed by major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, etc. At the 4th line here, we're starting from the 2nd, the key of G, 2nd and 4th, so minor, minor, major, major, minor, minor, major, minor, Let's have a look. And the group of first and second string, we're starting from the fifth. Hence, it's going to be a major, minor, minor, major, minor, minor, major. Now, do we have to play thirds, double stops, necessarily on adjacent strings next to each other? I don't necessarily know the word, apologies for that. Well, no, we don't have to. If anything, actually, a large gap between the root note and the third. So here is your double stop. As I said, even if these are no chords, it gives you a perception of it. So if I play, for example, something like this. It gives you a sense of harmony, although, as I said, we could not say, okay, that's G, that's B minor or whatever. So this can be an interesting way to try and compose things. Let's take, for example, this just using single note and a single note and a bass note going with it. Now, if you look at the PDF, you'll see that I also added horizontal position where you're playing across the neck, not on the next string, as you can see, root and third, and as usual, follow the black dots, followed by white dots, etc. Same thing for second and fifth string, same thing for first and fourth string. And so is these three, basically. And what you're looking at is this. And if you go into the following, and if we go to the following, and this is all, in this case, I want to say, key of G, because the sequence we're using is all off the key of G. So I'm playing things which are off G major, A minor, B minor, C major, etc., etc. So how do we learn, to respect the key, etc., etc., etc.? And here is where our third PDFs comes in. Now, this last PDF is not written in the key of G, but it's actually using all sorts of different keys. And as you will see, even though double stops are not chords, in the following example, we are using root and thirds, major or minor third, to imply chords and frame the double stops within the diatonic scale. What that means in this case is, so for example, here we have the key of D, and this tab starts from, here is the root, here is a D note, and on top of that is the major third. And the reason I wrote the chords on top, although as I said, these are not, double stops are not chords, is so that you have a reference. So in the key of D, you have D, E minor, F sharp minor, G major, A7, B minor, C half diminished. And I wrote them in two different manners. Here you're playing it as a sequence, and here you're playing it kind of moving the melody around. I'll play it to you in a second. So again, I'm gonna play you these examples while I'll show you where we are on the PDF, so you can hear it and see it at the same time. So this example here is simply this: key of D, first and second string. If you look at now at this example here, it's pretty much the same thing, but this is played this way. So we're not just playing it up and down, we're also kind of doing some skipping. But this is all horizontal kind of structure. Now, in analyzing the second and third string, I'm using the key of B flat in this case. And so if you look at the chords here, you will have B flat, C minor, D minor, E flat, F7, G minor, A half diminished, etc. Again, so you get used, not, it's not all in G. So let's have a look at B flat, and it sounds like this. Well, this exercise is exactly like the one before. So we're basically looking at group of strings. At the same time, the way we're approaching it is we're starting from the bottom of the neck, going all the way up and all the way down, okay? And utilizing, in this case, different keys so that you get used to it. In fact, if we keep going, I don't want to waste too much of your time. You'll see that here for the string 3 and 4, we're using the key of F, and here is the chords in the key of F. And for the first and second string, I'm using the key of C. Here are the chords in the key of C. And if you look at the fifth and sixth strings, I'm using the key of G. It's the same kind of exercise though, okay? For the larger spread of the thirds, in this case, I'm using the key of G for third and sixth string. And for second and fifth string, I'm using the key of C. While from sixth and third string, I'm using the key of F. Now, before we move on to this. So far, just to recap, we looked at thirds double stops played from the root, like in this last example. We're going from the bottom of the neck to the top of the neck and back. We also seen, because of the theory we studied, because chords are played in interval of thirds, so they are stacked thirds, that in extracting double stops, we can look at them from different point of view within the chord. We can construct double stops from the root to the third, but also from the third to the fifth, or from the fifth to the seventh. And as we develop our studies of double stops, we look at it, how that gets framed, very interesting, into harmony. But let's not put too much meat on the fire in terms of exercises. The first thing you want to do is do this PDF. So you looked at the PDF where everything is executed. Root, basically, interval is root, note, and third, and is harmonized using the major modes. And then we looked when we have a static G, because a static note, in this case I used G, and we can move all, root fifths, etc. In fact, when you look at this PDF, if you keep going, now you have the square notes are not notes that you are playing. These are just for reference, but it's to give you a sense of what it would sound like if you're using root and third as opposed to third and fourths, okay, as opposed to fifth and seventh. So these are just a reference. For example, I'll show you what I mean. Is like I'm gonna loop. Just imagine like I'm a bass player or something. I'm just gonna loop a G major scale horizontally. Okay, so you'll see, so that it just goes around. So if I take root and third and I start moving it horizontally, it's gonna sound this way. Does it make sense? So root and third. Okay, but if I take the second line, so instead of using root and third, I'm actually using third and fifth of each chord. So this is third and fifth of G in this case. This is third and fifth, although it's 4 and 6 from a perspective of G, but it's third and sixth from a perspective of A. And again, third and sixth from a perspective of B. But the sound, it's gonna be different. And it's different than this. Now, what happens if I use fifth and seventh from each chord? Okay. Different sound. Now let's see what happens if instead of use 7 and 9 from each chord. Okay, so the bass line is still the same. I'm starting from the 7 and the 9 of G, and this is basically the 7 and 9 of A, 7 and 9 of B, 7 and 9 of C, etc., 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 etc. As you can see, the more we go away from the root note, so in this case 7 and 9s, and now we're going to do 9 and 11s, the more, we don't hear the harmonization anymore, let's put it that way, compared to this. That was root and third, as opposed to 7 and 9. Okay, now if we look at the 9 and 11th, I did it down here, so this is 9 and 11 in the key of G, so this is 9 and 11 A minor, 9 and 11, etc., etc., etc. And of course, after 9 and 11, we can look at 11 and 13s. Okay, here is your 11, here is your 13, harmonized. Make a mistake. Last but not least, we have 13 and root, which is over here, 13 and root. this, as I said, might look more complicated than actually it is. At the end of the day, the sequence is always the same as if it's applied to a major modes like we are to a major scale basically, and we're just harmonizing the major scale. The sequence, is not changing. In this case, I'm seeing it from a G perspective. Okay, major, minor, minor. What was changing now when I was going from third to fifth, or fifth to seven, or seven to nine, was the starting point. So I could start, say, in G. I could start from there, but in G I could also start from, say, 7 and 9. Okay, or that's 11 and 13, 3rd and 5th. And I'm just using but then after that, the sequence is, as I said, is pretty much the same. If I start from think about it, if you start from the third, we know that the third is a minor interval in between the third and the fifth. And we know that after that, so chord number 4 is major, so it's going to be like a major interval. So right? That's the one. Then chord number 5 is going to be a major interval. Chord number 6 is a minor interval. Chord number 7 is a minor interval. And then you're back to the root note. In fact, that's G. If you decided to go, say, from, I don't know, the 6th, okay? This is a 6. I'm still using G, okay? So from the 6th, you're going to the root note. And we know the 6th is minor, so the 7 is also going to be minor. Then root note is major interval. 2nd is a minor interval. 3rd is minor. 4th is major. 5th is major. 6th is minor. 7th is minor. Back to major. Right? So what you need to remember is, the relationship in between when is a minor interval and when is a major interval. And it's a good thing to start from harmonizing a major scale, because that's what we've done from lesson 1. So we're basically taking G. In this case, I'm using G, but we're going to use different keys, and that's why I used different keys. So you don't get, in this case, you don't get too fixated on the key of G. Now, can we do this stuff also vertically as opposed to just horizontally? Of course we can, and we're going to look into that even much deeper than we are right now. But one thing that I wanted to point out is that so far we looked at the cage system more often than not for, scales and arpeggios and chords. And although we did look at the 3 notes per string to a good degree of analysis when we were doing, the 5 shapes. So lesson 1 to maybe 15. When it comes to double stops, you quickly notice that applied to a 3 notes per string kind of position is going to be more efficient than trying to use the cage system, for the simple reason that the cage system doesn't have enough frets. What I mean is, let's say I wanted to play, so I'm going to go root and third as a double stop. And you remember this is, say, I'm using shape of E, okay? And the chord is G. Now I'm playing first and second and fourth. The moment I want to play the B note, so the third note, either I have to borrow from the earlier shape, in this case would be I'm using empty strings, or I have to shift to the next shape, because it would be here. And now I'm in. So there is always cross-pollination in between shapes if you're trying to execute double stops, in this case thirds, vertically. A better solution is to think in terms of 3 notes per strings kind of position. You have 7 position. And I'm adding a PDF to this lesson in case you forgot them, just, But what you see here on the PDF, so what you see here on the PDF basically is third intervals, in this case vertical structure, within, in this case, the key of G. We're using 7 position 3 notes per string approach as opposed to the cage system, might result in a more logical execution of third double stops across the neck. We studied the 7th position when we studied the major modes, blah, 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 blah. So if I take what we were doing just, just now, if you look at this, you will find that it sounds like. And basically what we're using is a combination of, in this case, and followed by, right? Then as I said, the best thing you can do in this case is literally to study the tab, and just get used to the 7, in this case, the 7 position. You'll find it way more comfortable than trying to apply the cage system in this case. And as we move forward, I mean, this is a lot. I'm totally with you if you feel confused about this. But we're gonna study double stops for a while and look at different things we can do with them. This is just, believe it or not, some sort of prepping you for it. When we do other intervals, 5th, 6th, it's going to be a little bit easier because it might have a little bit less possible harmonic implication. As I say, thirds can be very interesting in allow us kind of to imply harmony, even if it's not there. And a little bit the same will happen when we do fourths, double stops, and that might imply some degree of quartal harmony. But as I said, most of Western music is based on staccato thirds when it comes to triads and extended chords and modal arpeggios, etc., etc. A lot to digest. I hope I haven't confused you even more. It's a lot. It's difficult to organize, and that's why it's taking a little bit longer to prepare this lesson. Trying to think how to break it down in sizable chunks. Anyway, have a look at the PDFs, study them. They're quite self-explanatory in a way, and a left note so whenever something is less clear, and ask questions. Probably that's the best way to remove any form of confusion. I thank you in advance for your support. If you decide to subscribe to the channel, even more importantly, if you decide to support this project on Patreon. We're at lesson 50 by now, so we're slowly plowing through. There is still a lot. Anyway, next lesson is still going to be on double stops. We're going to still digging into this, and then we're going to take a break from it and do something else before we come back to it. As I say, this is going to be 10-15 lessons probably on double stops, but they're not going to be consecutive because otherwise probably our brain would fry. Okay, it's been a pleasure, and until next time, bye.